The movie starts with a woman traveling from China to Hong Kong. She's carrying a lunchbox in her hand. When she gets home, she opens all the containers and throws most of the food away, except for one box. Inside that box is a small dish of dumplings. She carefully cleans them and eats them. These dumplings are special, and they're the title of the film. This woman's name is May, though some call her Aunt May because she's older. But here's the twist. May looks surprisingly young for her age. How is that even possible? What's her secret? We'll soon find out, and trust me, it's terrifying. May doesn't just make dumplings for herself. She's well known for them because they're fresh, delicious, and in high demand. But the real reason behind her youthful looks lies in a shocking secret ingredient she adds to her dumplings. The next day, a woman named Mrs. Lee comes to visit May. Mrs. Lee used to be a famous actress, but those days are behind her. She married a wealthy businessman and now lives as Mrs. Lee, a name more tied to her husband's status than her own identity. Their marriage is cold. There's no love, no connection. He married her to boost his social standing, and now as she's getting older, that status is slipping away. Mrs. Lee's husband spends his time with younger, more beautiful women, leaving her feeling neglected and desperate. She realizes that as her looks fade, she's losing everything: her husband's attention, her sense of self-worth, and her place in the world. That's why Mrs. Lee has come to May. She's heard rumors about May's dumplings, how they have magical properties that can turn back the clock and restore youth. Desperate to reclaim her beauty and keep her husband's attention, Mrs. Lee is willing to try anything, even if it means diving into the dark secrets behind May's famous dumplings. The dumplings May makes have a strange power. They can make someone look younger, almost as if they stop aging or even reverse it. The beauty they bring isn't just skin deep, it makes people irresistibly attractive. But Mrs. Lee isn't sure she believes in such magic. She tells May, "Show me proof." May responds, "What do you think? How old do I look?" Mrs. Lee guesses, "You must be over 30. May smiles and says, "You can't guess my age. What else do you need? I put something special in my dumplings, something that gives results no beauty cream or lotion can match. After eating my dumplings, I've stayed young and beautiful. You won't get those results from surgery either, because age is a natural process. Everyone has to grow old eventually. But I can slow that down from the inside with the help of my dumplings." Mrs. Lee is curious but still skeptical. She decides to give it a try, thinking, "This is my last shot. Maybe it'll work, maybe it won't, but I have to try." So she starts visiting May every day, eating the dumplings without fail. As she continues, she begins to wonder what exactly is in them. She starts to suspect that the special ingredient might be the flesh of a small animal, but at this point she doesn't care. She's so desperate for a solution that she ignores the possible dark side of the dumplings. All Mrs. Lee cares about now is the result. She's feeling better about herself, but she's also noticing something else. Her husband has been going on more trips lately. She knows exactly who he's traveling with. A few days go by and Mrs. Lee starts to notice changes. Her skin is looking younger, but she's impatient. She wants results faster. So she asks May, "Please do something so I can see results overnight." May looks at her and says, "I promise you it will happen." As Mrs. Lee leaves, another woman comes to May's house. She's brought her young daughter, Kate, who's just 15 years old. From their conversation, we learn that May used to be a doctor. She would handle at least 10 cases a day, but she stopped practicing. The woman explains that she's brought her daughter to May because Kate is pregnant, and it's not from a man she loves. In fact, Kate's own father is the one who has wronged her. Now the poor girl is carrying his baby, and her mother is lost, not knowing what to do. Kate's mother is unsure if she should let her daughter keep the baby or end it. May examines Kate and discovers that she's already 6 months pregnant. It's a difficult situation, and May knows she can't help. So she tells them, "I'm sorry, I can't do anything for you." May advises the woman to contact the black market, where she can find a hospital that deals with such situations. There, Kate's baby can either be born or ended. May explains that she's still in touch with that hospital, but she's not a doctor there. She used to steal the flesh of small children from the hospital, which she secretly used as an ingredient in her dumplings. It turns out that the special ingredient in her dumplings isn't from animals, it's from human children. This was May's dark secret. Meanwhile, Mrs. Lee has been struggling with her husband's affair. She knows he's been spending his nights with a young woman at a hotel. Mrs. Lee can't take it anymore. She calls May to her house and says, "I have no one but my husband and my house. I want to have children, but for some reason I can't." May decides to help her, but she's also concerned about Kate, who's getting sicker. Her mother is deeply worried about her. The next day, May invites Kate and her mother to her house. Without any drugs, she helps Kate give birth to the baby. The pain is intense, but eventually, the baby comes out. When May sees the baby, a strange smile crosses her face. She thinks to herself, "This is exactly what I wanted." The baby is healthy, and May knows that this baby's flesh will help her make Mrs. Lee young again. This baby is special. It's the flesh of 5 different mothers, making it more nutritious and powerful than any other baby she's ever used. May believes that if she uses this baby's flesh in her dumplings, it will work like magic. Mrs. Lee will become young overnight, just like she dreams. But May knows that if she gives Kate any drugs, all of the baby's strength and nutrients will be lost, so she carefully stores the baby's mask in her refrigerator. The next day, when Mrs. Lee comes to her house, May takes the mask and begins mixing it into the dumplings. For days, Mrs. Lee had been suspicious that May was mixing something unusual in her dumplings. Unable to wait any longer, she sneaks into the kitchen where May is preparing to grind the meat. When Mrs. Lee sees what's happening, she gets so scared that she runs out of the house. But as she's leaving, she starts to think, "I've been eating this for so long already. What if this is the answer? My beauty and looks are so important to me. As I get older, I'm losing them. If this continues, my husband will leave me one day." She realizes that if these dumplings with the flesh of a child can keep her young and beautiful, she'll do whatever it takes. So she decides to go back to May's house. May prepares the dumplings with the same special ingredient and gives them to Mrs. Lee. As she eats, Mrs. Lee starts to feel hopeful about the results. With every bite, she's convinced this is the solution she's been looking for. May watches her and says, "These dumplings will definitely give you the results you want. They'll give you a new, happy life. You'll soon see the change in yourself." After a few days, Mrs. Lee begins to change. She looks younger, more attractive. Her husband notices, and he can't take his eyes off her. He even praises her, saying, "You're looking so beautiful." Mrs. Lee is overjoyed. They spend quality time together for the first time in a long while. Mrs. Lee feels like her life is finally back on track. Her husband is now focused on her, giving her his time instead of his work, which means so much to her. But as with any miracle, there's always a price to pay. The effects may be good for now, but they come with consequences. Mrs. Lee decides to throw a party at her house, inviting all her friends and relatives to celebrate. May reassures Mrs. Lee, telling her, "Tomorrow everything will be fine. Don't worry." Mrs. Lee feels a bit better, but what she doesn't know is that her husband overheard their conversation. He had suspected for a while that his wife was taking something special, maybe a herb, medicine, or something else. After hearing May's words, he figures it out and decides to meet her the next day. When Lee meets May, she offers him her dumplings. Now Lee understands that May is a cannibal and that her youthful appearance comes from eating human flesh. He realizes that she's been feeding these dumplings to others too, keeping them young in the same way. May is 65 years old, but she looks much younger. But Lee isn't disturbed by this. In fact, he's only focused on how young and beautiful she is. From the moment he saw her, he was attracted to her, so he starts a relationship with May. May, knowing exactly how to use him, takes advantage of the situation, trapping him in her web. She doesn't want to let this opportunity slip away. For a year they're together, and Lee completely ignores his wife, Mrs. Lee. What May wanted has come true. She has a rich man completely in love with her. Lee is drawn to her beauty, and Mrs. Lee can't stand to be left out. She's desperate to stay in touch with May because her body has grown addicted to those dumplings. If she stops eating them, she fears her beauty will fade. She had started to notice signs. Red spots on her body and trouble sleeping. She knows she needs the dumplings to stay youthful, so she goes to May, demanding more dumplings. But May refuses to listen. Meanwhile, Kate, the young girl May helped deliver, is in terrible pain. May didn't perform the operation properly, and Kate wasn't strong enough to survive. Tragically, she dies. The neighbors informed the police about it. Then the police arrested Kate's mother. When she was questioned, she took the name of May. But before police came to arrest her, May ran away from there. May was saved, but Mrs. Lee was trapped. She understood that she won't be able to live without those dumplings. If she is alive, my youth and beauty will be gone. Now May has to arrange for those dumplings herself. She finds a way. She finds the same hotel staff with whom Lee was related. She finds out that girl is pregnant. She is also pregnant of 5 mothers. Because this child was wanted by Lee, she made a deal with the girl that if she will give me a baby, then she will pay him a lot. So Mrs. Lee asks the hotel staff for her baby, that I want this 5-mother baby. She says, I have promised you to the amount as promised by my husband Lee. She wanted to hunt 2 birds with 1 stone. If I get this baby, she will leave it when she will not give it to Lee. And this thorn of my path will also be finished. And she had a lot of hope that this girl will be killed during that time. And if I get that baby, I can keep my youth, and for this, that girl agrees. And Mrs. Lee takes it and goes to the lady doctor. And she gives birth to this baby, just like I did without any drug, because she also wanted this baby to be healthy, and it is also according to her thinking. The girl is killed during this process, and now she brings that baby home. Then she puts it in a chopper to grind. After it, she will eat it, which meant that in the end, like me, Mrs. Lee became a murderer in the process of being beautiful. Now she doesn't need anyone, nor any other process, because she will always get a child in return for money. After eating it, she always remained beautiful and young, which was her wish, to always remain beautiful and young, and to get the love of her husband, which was now possible. And from now on, her husband will not look at anyone. In fact, he will only be attached to his wife, but the way behind it is very dangerous. And with it, this story also ends here.